Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of At the Heart of Hope. I'm Hope Poole, and today my guest on the show is my good friend Skyla. I met Skyla around 6 years ago when I started going to her church, and it's been an honor to get to know her.
Yes.
Today, she is sharing a story with us that focuses mainly on her journey of growing her family. So, without further ado, I'll let her get started on how she met her husband.
Okay. Yeah, my husband and I have been together for I guess 11 years now, and his name is Lee. We're high school sweethearts, and we started dating when I was 14, and he was 17. So there was a little bit of an age gap there, but it was great.
Did y'all go to the same school?
We did not. I was
Okay.
homeschooled from third grade on, and
Okay.
so he actually came to our church, and that's how we met. Was at youth group. Was at El Bethel.
Sweet.
Yep.
Where it all began.
Yes. And so now we've been married for 7 years.
Wow. And tell me a little bit about when y'all decided y'all wanted to start trying to have a family.
Yeah, so I think we did kind of the typical, what most people do. I don't want to say cliche, but we'll wait a year. That was kind of our idea of it. Was, oh, we'll wait a year and then we'll talk about it then. And because I was pretty young and so was he. And then we got married in July, and in January after Christmas, I felt very convicted by the Lord that I was not trusting him with my family because I was on birth control, and that was just my personal conviction, but I was very convicted about it. And so I prayed about it for a couple of weeks and ended up telling Lee, hey, babe, I feel like the Lord is telling me that we're not trusting him with our family, and I think he wants me to go off birth control.
Yeah.
And Lee was like, okay. I mean, it was just so supportive. I was not expecting that. We both wanted kids, definitely, but like I didn't necessarily know how he would take
react.
it. Yeah.
Whoa.
Because I mean, we're 7 months in, and we are very young, and we were definitely still figuring things out. And he was like, okay, well, if that's what you think the Lord's telling you to do, then let's do it. And so I basically called my doctor up, and I was like, we want to go off birth control. What do we need to do that's safe? And so he gave us the guidelines, and I mean, that basically started our story. I was pregnant the very first month.
Oh, wow.
And then the very first month of us being off birth control, we weren't trying. That was not, we were just trusting, or I thought we were just trusting the Lord. That was just kind of, we were just kind of going at it, whatever was right, And, and so anyways, I ended up pregnant, and then, my sister actually ended up pregnant at the same time. So Mackenzie ended up pregnant with Carter.
Oh my
goodness. And so we were like just a couple of weeks apart, really.
Wow.
And then 8 weeks came around, and I lost that first baby. And so at the time, I was kind of just like, I didn't really, I knew that it was common to lose your first child, your first baby, and so I kind of was like, all right, we'll just have another baby. I mean, I definitely was devastated. But and it was still exciting because Kenzie was pregnant, and so I was like, I get to have it in Kenzie, like I get to witness it through her, and like have this reminder. And so we did all the, we called the doctor, all the things they tell you to do, and so we kind of followed by those guidelines. And then as soon as we started trying, we were pregnant again. And I mean, immediately, like there was no month wait or anything. Like we literally were pregnant right away. And so this time it rocked on, and I was like 9 weeks pregnant. I was going in for my first ultrasound. And when we went in, they went to do the ultrasound, and they couldn't find the baby. And we were like, of course, devastated. Like your mind automatically goes to the worst place ever. And so, but you're trying to have faith. And so I was like, okay, and they're like, we'll have to see you back in 10 days. You have to wait 10 days, and then we'll come back because maybe you're just too early and we just can't see the baby. So their rule of thumb is 10 days. Okay. And I was like, 10 days? That's a week and a half. That's forever. Eternity when you're waiting, yeah. And so we waited the 10 days. My mama was like, I'm going to go with you to this next one if that's okay. I'm like, yes, please. Right. And so she ended up going with us, and they discovered that there was just no baby basically formed in my womb. So my body was almost, there's a name for it, but I don't remember, but it was almost like tricked into believing that it was pregnant, but it wasn't. There was a baby implanted, but nothing ever grew. And so That's how he explained it. So after that, my mama was like, okay, she's had 2 miscarriages, in 3 months. What do you recommend? If it was your daughter
Mm-hmm.
going through this, what do you think? And he was like, I think I would do a D&C. And so they scheduled me for a D&C, and I had, that procedure done. And I'll never forget being rolled back into the room and me just like thinking to myself, like just crying, obviously, on the because it's like, that there's not a baby there, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it was like I was saying goodbye to my baby.
Sure.
And I was like, it's my last moments with you. It kind of felt like,
Yeah.
And so, anyways, the doctors were great. My doctor was so awesome, and held my hand. He was just very, very attentive to me, and so, anyways, after that, he was like, "I want you to wait a little bit longer this time. So wait, 2 months." And it kind of messed me up cycle wise. So I didn't end up getting pregnant right away that the next time. And so it had been like, I think 4 months. And I went back to him and I was like, hey, what's going on? Like my cycle's all crazy. It's never been like this. I think something happened in the procedure. Like, what do? I was like, I don't think I've never experienced anything like this as far as it like not being on time. And he was like, okay, we'll just do a round of Clomid.
Mm-hmm.
And I had close friends take Clomid, and so I was very familiar with the drug. And I was like, okay, we'll do that. And so he did a round of Clomid. Sure enough, I got pregnant right away. And that one only lasted about 6 weeks. So I had an 8-week miscarriage, a 10-week miscarriage, and then a 6-week miscarriage, all in less than a year.
Oh my goodness.
And so after that one was my like, that one hit me hard because that one was supposed to work. I knew all the ones that had, all these people had taken Clomid after miscarriages, and it worked, and that was the one that was supposed to stick. And so I remember waking up in the morning discovering that I was miscarriaging, and of course calling my mama, right? And she come over and she called the doctor and stuff because that's what mamas do, right? They do the hard things.
Yeah.
And so she called the doctor, and he was like, okay, we want to see her, of course. And shortly after they went to leave the house and just give me and Lee like some time. And she went to leave and she hugged me bye, and I just broke down in her arms. And she was like, honey, what is it? Like, just say what you're thinking. And I was like, I just don't understand. Like, I just don't understand. I feel like I'm doing all the right things. And I was like, Lee and I have done, the things that you're supposed to do. I was like, we saved ourselves for marriage. We done everything that the Lord, instructed us to do. And I don't understand why. And it wasn't that I necessarily, because I really didn't feel like God was punishing me. I just felt like I didn't necessarily know what it was that was happening. And Mama was like, okay, honey, but you got to fight back. Like, it's not going to happen again. Fight back. And so during that time, Lee and I got like dead serious, like war room, like Miss Clara war room serious. And I was like, okay, I made my own, literally made my own war room. I had like drawn out plans of what we were going to do. And this was my prayers. And I had great examples too, growing up, of people that really, knew what it was like to fast and pray for the Lord to move in their life. And so Lee and I really leaned on speaking how we spoke. And I was very, very serious about this from the very first miscarriage. I didn't want anyone to know because I was like, I don't want that title on my life that I'm not going to have kids, that she's not going to be able to have children.
Yeah, you don't want that identity to. No. I used to worry that every time somebody would see me, that's what they would think about. Yeah. That would be the only thing they could see in my life.
Right.
Or they would feel bad for me or things like that. And like what you talked about, after the first miscarriage, being like, okay, well, it's okay. This happened. Right. I felt the same way, after the first one. You're like, well, statistically speaking, and I always say, like, being in healthcare, everybody, I'm like, I know the odds. Like, yes. this is fine. And then same, had the second, and I was like, you almost felt so let down because you think, well, I already did this. Like, I already endured it. I made it through. I was faithful to the Lord. I prayed through it. Yeah. Like, He's not going to let me go through this again. And then I was like, well, okay, so 2, but it's really uncommon to have 2 in a row. And then I had my third, and I was like, that was the hardest. It's like, this is not supposed to be happening.
Right. Yeah.
So you feel like you kind of, like you said, like, I'm doing everything right. I'm being faithful. I'm doing this. Why is the Lord letting me walk through this? That's hard. That's a hard place to be in.
Well, I ended up shifting my prayer at that time after the third one. It's funny now looking back that I thought at the time that I was really giving it to the Lord and really trusting Him. And then it really wasn't until that third baby that I was like, okay, if this is there's a song that says, if this is my cross to bear, I'll praise you anyway. And I was like, if this is my cross to bear, and if this is what I'm going to struggle with in my life, then I've got to be determined that God is still good. And so I started telling people, like my siblings that would text and be like, are you okay? I'm praying for you or whatever. My response would be, my foot's on the rock and my mind is made up that no matter what, I'm going to serve the Lord and I'm going to praise Him because He is good and because He doesn't fail us. And even though I felt like God was really failing me at the time, and I remember like singing songs in church about that He doesn't, that He's never going to let me down. And I was like, I feel so let down.
Oh yeah.
I feel so let down. But it's terrible how we tend to want to blame everything on God when we don't really realize how much the enemy is after us.
100%.
Like we want to ignore that part of it. And so when I really realized that the enemy was after me and that this was how he thought he was going to get me was through my family, because that's all I talked about as a child, that I wanted to be a mama, I wanted to be a wife. And so he thought, I've got her, right? Yeah. Like, this is it. And so when I was like, no, you don't have me. You can do it over and over and over again. And Lord, I pray that that doesn't happen. Right. But if He does, my mind is made up because I'm going to serve you. And so anyways, I started just like focusing on that tactic. And I had like this little phrase. And if you have read any of me like talking about my story, I usually end like with this phrase, and it's that God does not fail. And it's just, to me, that spoke a lot to me because I was like, no matter what, He doesn't fail. It may feel like He fails me, but His plan overall doesn't fail. And He doesn't fail me either because it's always going to get better. And so when I finally decided that no matter what, I was going to trust the Lord, whether I had a baby or didn't have a baby. And I never really thought that Lee and I weren't going to have children. I knew that the Lord was going to give me a child. Like I knew that this was a desire He gave me, and this was something I was going to have. I really believed it. Right. And never had a time that I thought that I wasn't, that I was going to be barren or whatever, I really truly believed the whole time that, and I think that's different than some people's story. The enemy can attack in different ways. Sure. But for me, I was just like, no, I know that I'm going to have a baby. And if anyone found out about my journey, like during the time, and was like, oh, she can't have kids, it upset me so much because I was like, do not speak that on my life. Yeah. That's not true. That's the devil talking through you. That's not true. I rebuked that in the name of Jesus. I was like, we're going to have children, and we're going to have a bunch of them. Yeah. And I would say that over and over. And people would be like, oh my goodness, like, how are you? You should just be thankful for one. And I was like, oh, I will be. I'll be so thankful for one, but we're going to have a bunch. Right.
Yeah. I think too, the way you were talking about how the devil comes at you like through people and stuff. I know I struggled so much with thinking, well, if children are a blessing from God, our losses or losing these children or having these miscarriages, like, is that a curse? Like, is God unhappy with me? And like we talked about before we started filming, like, I was not at a level of spiritual maturity at the time to really identify that. But looking back now, I'm like, the devil will speak to you any way that he knows how. And so for me, laying awake at night thinking, am I being cursed? Is God unhappy for what I've done in my past? Is God unhappy with me right now? The devil will really try to put a wedge in between your relationship with you and God, because that distanced me from Him in ways, especially in the middle of the night.
Oh, sure.
When I was seeking Him out, I would start having these intrusive thoughts. And I was like, He will try to drive a wedge, and he wants you to feel distanced, and he wants you to feel unloved by God, which he's just a liar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real way around it. And so then after we lost the third, my doctor was like, no, you cannot have another child. Like, you cannot get pregnant. Stop it. No trying. We're sending you to a specialist, and this is what you're going to have to do. He was like, do not get pregnant. Like, this is far too many. He was like, you're now diagnosed with recurrent miscarriage, and so you will not, please don't get pregnant. Like, you can't just let this keep happening to you. And so I was like, okay. And so he said, we're going to send you to a specialist. So he referred me to a specialist, and I reached out to them. And it's funny because a lot of people, want to have a break. I didn't want to have any breaks. I was like, I'm just like a go-getter kind of person. So I was like, no, we're going for it, And so, immediately started going to the specialist. They ran so many tests, so much tests. And so but I was still, the Lord's going to do this. And when Lee and I would talk about it, we were like, God's already got it handled. And I was believing in every test, every time we went to the lab, every time they did, a procedure or whatever. I was like, the Lord's already fixed it. Whatever it was, the Lord's handled it, and it's good. And that's what I believed. And so they did like a month and a half of testing before you started doing treatment. And so at the month and a half at the end, they called you in and told you what was wrong with you. Basically, that was, and then what your plan was. And so at the end of that, they called us in, and the doctor, which I had not met at the time, I was working with a midwife. The doctor was like, so you're kind of a different case because there's nothing that we can pinpoint that is wrong with you or with Lee. And I was expecting of that because I was like, the Lord has handled this. I know that he has. And, but he was like, I don't like this, right?
Yeah, I want to find a problem.
Yeah. And so some of it was, at one side of it, it's like, oh man, if they did know, like, oh, you just had low progesterone or whatever, you just take progesterone and it would fix the problem, And so I was content. I was like, that's fine. I think that that's because the Lord handled it. I really didn't struggle with a lot of doubt in that season and so they started with treatment. And then when you go to a specialist, they're like very hands-on. You go every week, you go certain days of the month, and they do ultrasounds and all that kind of stuff. And so I remember people telling me, put it out of your mind and just, have a baby. And I'm like, there's no way to put it out of my mind. Like, I'm doing ultrasounds every month, or every week, 2 times a week, depending on the day of the month. And so anyways, at the end of the month, they were supposed to call us and let us know if we got pregnant, right? It was pregnancy test day. And so I had talked to Lee that I was reading the Bible, and that I felt like the Lord was telling me specifically that I needed to learn how to take my every thought captive. And that I really needed to focus on that and to recognize when the devil was talking to me and when the Lord was talking to me, and what was good and what was bad. And so if it was a bad thought, I just immediately was like, I can't think about this. Like, just put it out of my mind. Nope, God doesn't fail. And that's what I would say in my mind. Nope, God doesn't fail. He doesn't fail me. He doesn't fail me even if this doesn't work.
Right.
He doesn't fail. And so they called and they were like, you're pregnant, And so, of course, Lee and I were ecstatic. And with going to them, you get to have an early ultrasound because they have, the best equipment.
Right.
And so we got to go like 2 weeks later to see the baby for the first time, which was our first baby that we ever actually got to see on ultrasound.
Sure.
We never got to see any of our other babies, which a lot of people do get to see their babies, but I never got to experience that. And so we saw the baby, and then after that, it was just pretty much smooth sailing. I got deathly sick from morning sickness, and I was so thankful to be sick because I had never experienced that either.
Right, and it's like a good sign.
Yeah, and to that like magnitude of sickness, I was like, and my mama was like, you're so sick. I mean, at one point I lost like 9 pounds in 1 week.
Oh my goodness.
And mom was like, you've got to call somebody because you're not eating. Like, you're not able to eat. You're just throwing up all the time.
You're like, it's okay. I'm good.
I was like, I could not be bothered. Like, I just nothing. And that's really my attitude towards it. And so
Yeah.
we had a smooth pregnancy and ended up having our first son. We didn't know that it was a boy, so it was a surprise. And yeah, and so we had our first son, Triton, and then he, was perfect and great. The only thing that happened with his delivery was um, at the time, like around the time it was time to push, they come in and a group of people come in, like I'm telling, like 12 people, and they were like, the heart rate is declining every time you have a contraction. And my mama apparently had already noticed that, and I just was chilling.
You were a little busy.
Yeah, and she had already noticed it, and so she was more aware of it than I was. So they come in and they're like, we've got to get the baby out, and I was like, okay. Well, come to find out, he had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. And I just really believe that was just the devil's like last little straw of like trying me. Sure. And I truly believe the Lord just intervened and was like, no, she's been through enough.
Yeah.
She's holding on to faith. And then in that time they come in and they were like, the heart rate's selling, and I was not panicked. I was like, we got this. Yeah, like the Lord's got this, we're praying. And my mom's like texting, everybody. She's like, pray. This is what they're saying. She's about to start pushing, and he came and they laid him on my chest. And it was just, the most sweetest moment of my life. I just sat there and bawled for like literally 30 minutes because I have a baby. And all I could say, all the words that come out of my mouth was just, thank you, Jesus. Like, thank you, Lord, for this child that you've blessed me with.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I think, wow, like if I never had experienced so much loss, I wouldn't experience Triton
so much joy,
and Canaan in the way that I do. Like I wouldn't. I actually, people that I've now get to like talk to about that are currently having miscarriages or have had miscarriages.
Yeah.
I'll tell them, I'm like, I know that this sounds so strange, but you get like a superpower, like a mama superpower, because I can listen to other people that have not had miscarriages, and don't get me wrong, it all is hard, but they're upset about having to get up at night. And I just remember praying, Lord, if you would just give me a baby, I would love to stay up all night. Like I want a baby to wake me up so bad during the night.
Yeah.
And I really often think about that in the night when I'm awake. I'm like, this is what you were made for. Like this is it. Like I'm so thankful. Thank you, Lord, for giving me a baby to be up at 2 a.m. in the morning for 3 hours.
I always wonder, I'm like, would I have been so grateful? I know that, you still love your children, all the things, but I'm like, I don't think I ever would have realized what a miracle conception and like a safe and healthy delivery and a safe pregnancy and getting to leave the hospital with a baby is just such a blessing. Like it's not a promise. It is truly a blessing. And those up late at nights, I remember my mom was like, you've got to get some sleep, honey. Like, when are you ever going to get some sleep? Because Hank would be up all night long. And I'm like, I'll just sleep when I'm older. Like, it doesn't really bother me. Like, when my kids get bigger, I'll sleep. Like, it's okay. And it does, like, those quiet moments at night, like feeding and doing all the things, like, it is, gratitude changes your mindset about everything. And I think experiencing those losses and going through those trials gives you just such a dose of thankfulness for when you do finally have the child. And that just changes your outlook on everything.
Yeah, it really does.
Makes it so special. That is really true. Okay, so after Triton, then where did we go?
Okay, so then after Triton, we, of course, we're like, we're going to enjoy this baby. Everything, we soaked him up. And
he's so lovable.
We loved on him to another level, right? And I just wanted to do everything. I was just like, I love every part of being a mama. I love not. And it's funny because a lot of people, they're always like, no, you need a break. I'm like, I don't want a break.
Don't take my baby.
I love every part of being with him and what mama means. Like every description of it. That means I don't get to ride the roller coaster. That means I have to sit out in church. Whatever it means, I love it because it means that I'm his mama.
Right.
And so around, I guess, a year, Lee and I we were like, we're not going to talk about another baby until around a year. Now,
Mhm.
I never went back on birth control. We
Sure.
just trusted the Lord. And so used other forms of conception. And anyways, um, I around a year, we were talking about it. We were just talking, and Lee and I were like, okay, we're going to start praying about it.
Mhm.
And we had determined we're going to take some time. We're going to pray about it and see what the Lord thinks. That was our goal. Was
Yeah.
from here on out, in the way that we plan our family, it's going to be, what does the Lord say He wants for our family versus what we say. And so
it's hard to give over control of the plan.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very hard. And so I was like, this is what I felt like the Lord was teaching me, which is the same thing we talked about after having him and not going back on birth control. I was like, I felt like the Lord was still teaching me to trust him with my family. And so I couldn't go back on birth control, right? Because that would be ultimately taking things into my own hands. That's just how I feel. I don't think that that's necessarily the case for everyone, and not everybody's convicted with the same thing either. That's just was my conviction.
Right.
And so I was like, I feel like I can't go on birth control because of that reason. And Lee was like, I agree. I think that would be going against what you feel like the Lord has taught you in this. And I was like, okay, thank you, for supporting me.
Right.
And so anyways, a year rolled around and we started praying about it. And that next month, I mean, we were not trying, not even a little bit. That next month, I was like, I knew that I was pregnant, and I had like some days coming up, and I was like, I'm not ready to know. Like, I'm just gonna pray about it.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I know like some people really want to know as soon as you can, and I was just like, if I can just hold it right here, like in my heart for a little bit longer, and pray over this baby, I know, I know that I'm expecting,
right.
But if I just hold it and just not test for some reason, that's like such a peaceful time to me. And so I was just praying by myself, like I hadn't told Lee or I didn't know. No, I hadn't taken the test.
Sure.
I just had a really good idea. And so I was just praying over the baby, just pretending like I didn't know.
Right.
So we discovered, that we were expecting. And so then we went to our first ultrasound, and same thing happened with our second miscarriage. They could not find a baby.
Oh my goodness.
And I was supposed to be like 7.5 weeks. So a pretty good time. I mean, I did kind of push to have the ultrasound sooner because I was nervous, And so they were like, we can't find the baby. So 10 days. And so we actually had a trip planned in the middle of that time. And so we were actually going to go out of town and then have to come back. So I was like, okay, 10 days. What's so funny is my mama talked to us before we had the appointment. She was like, can I go with you and sit in the car with Triton? And I was like, sure. This in the midst of like COVID, and they still weren't letting but one person in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, sure, you could go with us. And so we come out, she knew already. And I'm like, she was like, the Lord had already, kind of laid it on my heart that something wasn't right, that something was going to go wrong. And I was like, well, they couldn't find the baby. So they want to see us in 10 days. And she's like, okay, it's all right. And I just remember Lee looking over at me, and I wasn't crying or anything. I was just like, Lee said, how you feel, babe? And I was like, I believe that the Lord has promised this baby to us because we didn't do this. Like, this baby wasn't planned by us. We got pregnant and we were just praying about it. We were just trusting the Lord. Like, we didn't do this. This wasn't, you know what I mean? This wasn't us. This was all the Lord. So I'm just going to hold on to his promise that he is good and that he doesn't fail. And every time during that 10 days, we went out of town, which was a good distraction, but we went out of town. I ended up getting very sick out of town, so much that I ended up having to call my doctor. And I was like, I'm supposed to be attending, like going to these theme parks and doing all these things. And I can't get up the couch. Like, do you have something? I can't stop throwing up, which was just another reassurance to me, that everything's going to be fine. And so after that, we went to the 10-week appointment, and Lee and I went in. My mama was in the car, and he they went to do the ultrasound. As they're going through, we're not seeing the baby. And so Lee, he's holding my hand, and I'm just like looking up at the at the screen, and sure enough, she says, "Hey, I want you to move like this," And so I did what she said, and as soon as we did, there was the baby at the very back, and Lee and I both just started crying, and she was like, "You guys are gonna make me cry," and I was just like, "The Lord is so good, like thank you, Lord." We saw the heartbeat, they measured the heartbeat, we got to hear it, everything, and so then from then on out, everything went fairly smooth with Canaan's pregnancy, so I believed, and then I guess around, trying to think, it was like around the 7-month mark when you go in to have some blood work done. And I questioned them because I was having some itching, like just itching and like dry patches. And I was like, is there anything, like, do I need to go see my dermatologist? Like, is there like lotion that I could use? And she was like, no, but I'm gonna send you for some extra lab work when you go in to have your diabetes test. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't really think, she didn't say anything about
don't want to make the moms panic ever.
And so I was like, okay, and I was actually seeing a midwife at that time because the doctor that I had seen with all of my miscarriages, he wasn't available.
Okay.
So he kind of told me, keep calling and maybe a slot will open up during that month. He was like only taking so many people a month. And so I called. I wanted to see him, right? I called like every month I would call. And so right around that time I had called them, and sure enough, a slot had opened up with him. And he was like, yes, I can accept her now as a patient. So I ended up switching all during the time of having this blood work done. So by the time that the blood work come back, I was seeing him for my first visit with him, which obviously we knew each other, right? So he then determines, he's like, your blood work showed a little high on this test, and we're going to repeat it because it can sometimes just be high because of what you ate. You could have ate fried chicken or something like that, and it made it high. Sure. So I was like, okay. And so we went back in, had it repeated. Well, it was about the same level. And so he brought me back in. He was like, you have cholestasis is what they could call it. And it's like something that goes on with your liver, but the issue with cholestasis is the condition with it is that it causes stillbirths. And so I was just like, oh wow, like I was not expecting that. I was thinking like preeclampsia, something maybe it's similar to that, even though I didn't have any signs of that either. But I was like, well, what did I do? Like, what can I do? Can I like change my diet? Can I do something different? He was like, no, there's literally nothing you can do. We're going to send you to a specialist. You're going to have blood work done every 2 weeks, and they're going to monitor you and the baby for every 2 weeks. And I was just like, okay. He's like, and ultimately, we will take the baby at 37 weeks pregnant as soon as the baby is mature, if nothing happens before then. And he's like, but the specialist will determine. And I was like, so is the specialist gonna deliver, or are you gonna deliver? Like, who am I seeing here? He was like, it will be both of us. I will be there too if something were to happen. So we go to the specialist, and they were like, the baby looks good. Now, during like these ultrasounds, it was a 30-minute ultrasound, and they had to check off different things. Like they had to check off that the baby moved its arm, moved its leg, test for breathing, like watch the baby practice breathe. And that baby had to do all these like they literally call it a test. And if the baby doesn't do these things, the doctor takes you in for an emergency C-section. And that was ultimately what you were going for every 2 weeks to 1 week, that if it doesn't work out, you're going in for emergency C-section because he's going to take the baby. And we were just like, wow. Well, during that time, I was just holding on to the promise that I felt like the Lord, had made to us.
Right.
And in the beginning, and I was like, oh, this is just like the devil to really try and get me. And when I say that the devil was really trying to attack me, I began having things on like my Instagram and my Facebook come up of people that were having stillbirths.
Oh,
And
that's terrible.
my husband actually had a really close friend or a really close coworker of his have a stillbirth during that time.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just like, I just felt so attacked. And I was like, I can't, I got to get off Instagram. I got to get off all these things because the devil is attacking me
Mhm.
and he's attacking my mind. And I was just like, no, you're not taking every thought captive. No,
Mhm.
Lord, this is your plan. You promised this baby to us. I trust you. I trust you even if it's not good.
Mhm.
But I trust you that the baby, it is good. That
Mhm.
the baby's gonna, we're gonna have this baby. We still didn't decided that we weren't gonna, find out the gender.
Right.
And so we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. So it's kind of hard for me to talk about them in their gender
Oh yeah.
when I was pregnant with them. But so we ended up making it all the way to 37 weeks, and they were gonna, induce me or
Mhm.
whatever. And so I had just prayed up even to that like aspect of being induced. You have to be favorable to be induced a
Mhm.
certain way, and all these things. And so
All the things that are so out of your control.
yes, yeah, it was either you're either favorable or you have a C-section.
Mhm.
And I had a natural birth with Triton, and so I
Mhm.
was like, I really don't want to have a C-section. I would really like to have a natural. I had a great experience.
Sure.
I really liked having the baby natural.
Mhm.
But I was like, ultimately,
Whatever
we'll
it
do
takes.
what, yeah, ultimately. But I really want to try. And so I went in the week before, and I necessarily wasn't favorable, but they were gonna try the certain like insert that they
Mhm.
do, or whatever. And so I was like, okay. So they planned for me to go into the hospital, and I went into the hospital, and I'm favorable. As I go in, they're like, so
Mhm.
you could start pitocin, and I was like, no, I don't want to. Like
Mhm.
I think just do what we had planned to do, And he was like, that sounds good. We'll do this. And then in the morning, if
Mhm.
nothing has happened, we'll go to different things. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. He was like, so we'll do this tonight. And then when I come back in the morning, we'll make a different decision if nothing's happened.
Mhm.
Well, contractions started waking me up throughout the night. And I never ended up having to have Pitocin or anything like that. My body just kicked
Wow.
right into 37 weeks pregnant. I thought that's so amazing that the Lord, just really aligns every detail.
Oh yeah.
And so as we were pregnant with our son, that we didn't know was a son, my
Right.
husband and I were talking about girl names, boy names. Well, we had already had Triton, and Triton was like top of the list name. And that's the name we picked for him, even though we didn't necessarily know that was going to be his name at the time.
Sure.
So then having this baby, we had our girl name, and we had our top of the list girl name,
Mhm.
and then we had like a bunch of boy names, and we knew that we were going to name this boy after my daddy, Ashley, because Ashley is like a generational name
Mhm.
on the Gilly side, and so I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to name him after my daddy. Triton was named after Lee and Lee's daddy,
Okay.
and Lee is it's Triton Lee,
Mhm.
and it's like a really big generational thing on their side. A lot of them have Lee as a middle name. And so I was like, okay, we've named him after your side. If we have a boy, I would name him after my side
Sure.
and after my daddy. And so we knew we were going to name it Ashley, something with Ashley. But we had the name Caden picked out, and that
Okay.
was on our list, Caden. And we, as we were, Lee was like, "So this is it,
Sure.
we're naming the
Done.
baby Caden. It's gonna be, we thought it was gonna be Ashley Caden
Okay.
or Caden Ashley, something like that. We were like, either way, we like it. It sounds good, and we're gonna go with that. And a couple weeks before having the baby, I was like, that's not this baby's name. And Lee was like, yeah, it is. Like, that's the name. What do you mean? He was like, we like that name, babe. I was like, I do like it. Like, it's a great name. I was like, but I don't think it's this baby's name. And so he was just like, you're crazy. We're going to have this baby, and that's what we're going to name it.
Yeah.
He's going to look like a Caden, if it is a Caden.
Right.
And if it even is a boy. And I was like, okay, So I just started praying about it. And I was actually talking to one of my friends, and she was saying that she had a dream of the name that she was going to name her child. And the Lord gave her the name, and she named her son Noah.
Okay.
And I was like, that's so cool. Like, I want the Lord
I need
to
some
give
help
me a
with the
dream.
naming. Yeah.
Like, please give me a dream. So I was praying about the name, and I come across Canaan,
Mhm.
and I was like, Lee, what do you think about Canaan? It's the promised land.
Right.
And I was like, and we claimed that he was a promise to us all this time. And I was like, what do you think about Canaan? And he was like, I love it. I like that name.
Mhm.
And Lee and I always keep our names like really close to us. We're
Sure.
like, just want it to be, our idea. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to ask Mama what she thinks.
Right.
And I was like, so I told Mama, and I was like, you can't tell anyone, it's a secret, but what do you think about this name? And Mama was like, I love that name. And so we were like, we're just going to change the spelling of it to be a little bit different than what it is biblically.
Mhm.
But ultimately, we're naming the baby Canaan after the promised land. So sure enough, we had the baby, and it's a boy. And I was like, well, that's his name. And it was so funny because of like 2 weeks before, I had actually had a dream that we had a boy and we named him Canaan. And that was like my confirmation, because I was still like, I feel like it doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue. Is it going to be difficult to say? But anyways, yeah. And so we named him Canaan, and his name is Canaan Ashley. And so I got to present him to my daddy, because
so
daddy didn't know
sweet.
anything about us naming him after him. And so that was a really sweet moment to get to tell him, hey, like, this is what we did. We wanted to name him after you. And anyways, yeah, and so that's Canaan's name. And then after Canaan, we just kind of did the same thing. We were just like, we're gonna
Pray about it.
We're gonna pray about it, and we're just gonna enjoy this baby. We're gonna give it at least a year, because I nurse.
Sure.
And so I wanted, to be everything that I could be for the baby.
Right.
For this baby too. I didn't want to rush things. And so we prayed about it, started praying about it after a year, and we had some other things going on with our house situation and buying a home and fixing a home and all that stuff, construction, all that stuff. And so we waited a little bit longer, but around November of 2024, probably October, I started telling Lee, I was like, hey honey, I'm feeling like the Lord is telling me it's time.
Yeah.
And for the first time ever, Lee was like, I don't feel that way. And I was like, what do you mean?
Hold up.
Because, I've kind of took the reins with this all this time. The Lord is really. And he was like, I'm going to pray about it. And I was like, okay, well, are you praying about it? And he was like,
when are you going to pray?
Yeah. He was like, yeah, I'll be praying about it. And I was like, okay. And so the next month rocked on, and I was like, are you praying about it? And he was like, yeah, I'm still praying about it. But I think maybe next month. He was like, I just don't feel like, this is it just yet. And I was like, okay. And so anyways, with next month, and he was still like, don't know. He just comes to me one day. He's like, okay, I think that the Lord has told me it's time for us. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And this was our first time like praying about it, and then having to make the listening, having to listen, right? The Lord kind of took it into his hands.
Yeah.
The 2 times before. Yeah. And so we were like, this time we're actually praying and we're waiting on the Lord and we're practicing listening.
Sure.
And so Lee was like, yeah, I think, we're good. And so here we are that next month. And now I'm a month away from having baby number 3.
Oh my goodness.
And this baby has just been it's been such a sweet and smooth pregnancy. I currently don't have, you can develop it at any time, but I currently don't have the same condition that I had with Canaan. It's like a 50% chance. And so I'm doing like some, extra blood work. Sure. And I do see the specialists, they're really great about wanting to make sure that you're good. Even though you don't necessarily have it, they still want to see me, which I love that. And I had to wait. Everyone was like, do you have it? Do you have it? Do you have it? But you have to wait until you can't develop it until your 3rd trimester.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
And so I was like, no, I don't know. We don't know. You can't. Like somewhere around the 27, 25 week mark, I guess, people will start to develop this.
Okay.
And so I was waiting to do that test. And it was funny because people would, say they're like, we're praying against it. It's not going to happen. And I was just like,
sometimes I feel like it's, it's hard. I always kept things more to myself, like just me and Tyler would know, maybe one friend or a mom or something. But it's like it's a blessing and a curse sometimes to share what you're going through. It's such a blessing because you can have people really praying for you
Yes.
and, keeping you in their thoughts and prayers, and that's a blessing. But then people bring things up sometimes, like, "Oh, do you have that? Like,
Right.
do you think I haven't thought about that yet?" You know
Right.
what I mean?
No, I
Like,
know.
it can be hard.
Oh, I know.
And I think the intentions are always pure and the intentions are always good. But sometimes if you're struggling with that,
Yes.
that's why I try to never ask people, like, are y'all trying for another baby, or
Oh,
do
I
you
know.
want to have another
Yeah.
baby? You never know what people are going through. So I always try to just not.
I always try to make myself available,
Right.
like to be talked to about
Mhm.
it if you want to talk about it.
Sure.
Because I really do believe that, I went through these things to be able to help people
Right.
go through similar walks or
Mhm.
journeys. And, but yeah, I definitely think, it's funny because when you get pregnant after miscarriage, everyone is extra be careful, 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 careful.
Mhm.
Don't lift that, don't do this, don't do
Mhm.
that, nothing strenuous. And I totally get it.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I'm just like, I'm trying not to think about it.
Mhm.
So don't bring it back. Don't bring it
Right.
to
Don't
my
bring it up.
attention. I understand. Like it is very much so on my mind,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know. And so but it's like I know that it comes from a great place.
Right.
That they are just saying, "Oh, I just want you to be careful. I
Right.
just want everything to work out great." And I totally feel that. But
Yeah.
now with this baby, they were like, "We'll test you." And we found out on a Saturday night. I got the lab test back that I didn't have it currently. And I
Right.
was like, "You don't have it." And so I told Lee, I was like, "We don't have it."
That's
And he
awesome.
was like, "Oh, great." And so the next morning at church, we were singing and worshiping, and I was
Yeah.
just like thanking the Lord, like while I was singing, I was just thanking the Lord. I'm like, "Thank you, Lord, for this baby.
Yeah.
Thank you that I don't have cholestasis. Thank you, for just your hand on everything and your plan for us." And I was just thanking him. And I told Lee that it was so sweet of a moment because while I was thanking him, the Lord told me, He said, "You trusted me either way." And I just kind of like started crying and just stopped and was like, "I really did, Lord." Like
Yeah.
everybody was praying against it, and I was just like, "Lord, you're going to handle it. Whatever it is. If I
Mhm.
have it, if I don't have it, it's going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. Like the Lord's just going to take care of me." And I think that that's so sweet to have a God that you can just say
Mhm.
with open hands, this is your children. It's my baby. Thank you for giving it to me or her to
Mhm.
me. You don't know. Thank you. And if you need to take it or whatever, I just trust that it's going to be good
Mhm.
and that you're going to use it for your glory.
Right.
And no matter what, just having that surrender, which is very much so hard, but it's
So
a
hard.
it's a good practice. It's
It is.
it's a good practice for everyone to be in, but specifically, that's what I felt like the Lord just really taught me in having babies and family was that
Mhm.
you've got to give it to him. I had to give it to him. I was holding very tightly to this dream of being
Yeah.
a mama
Yeah.
and to just say, it's on you, Lord.
We're doing this devotional called The Cost of Control right now. If anybody hasn't done it, I highly recommend it. But it talks about all the things that you think you're gaining from controlling a scenario or a situation and what it actually cost you. It cost you so much anxiety, so much
Sure.
worry, so much fear. And in pregnancy, talking about people being like, "Oh, be careful." I just had to tell myself by the time that I got pregnant with Hank, I had to tell myself, like, whether I have this baby and whether this baby makes it here, in this earthly world into my arms is totally up to God. I've done everything the right way. I've been careful. I've eaten all the right foods, all the things. It's ultimately up to
Yes.
God. I mean, there's nothing that I can do at this point. And you do, realizing that, I wish I would have realized that a lot sooner, but realizing that gives you so much peace.
It does.
But it's really hard to get there. It is really hard to get there. And it's a great testimony to you in your walk with the Lord that you were able to get there and it served you so well. I'm sure that y'all can probably tell just by watching this, but I always tell Skyla, like, I think the joy of the Lord is my strength is such a Bible verse for her. Like, she's just always joyful, just radiates joy. And there's been times in my life where I thought people were joyful because their lives were perfect. or because they weren't struggling with the same things that
Yeah.
I was struggling with. And it took me a long time to determine the difference between happiness and joy. You know, you're happy over your circumstances.
Yeah.
True joy comes from your walk with the Lord. And that was really a hard thing for me to learn, but it's so beautiful. I've been able to watch you, and then one of my other friends that I had met before you, who's a missionary now, Rebecca Alford.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and
Yes, I
so
know them.
same thing. She was just similar personality, so joyful. And then not until I really got to know her, I learned that she had lost 2 children at a very young age from a terminal illness, a genetic condition.
Wow.
But you never know what someone is walking through.
Yeah.
And I think it's just wonderful that you've been able to bring your joy from that. I read a verse today, and it made me think of you too. It was James 1, 2-3, and it said, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And I think of you when I read that. And I think of that song. I sent Skyla a song just randomly a couple months ago, but that flower song, talking about sometimes flowers grow in the valleys. And I think that we've touched on that some, of the way that your walk with the Lord strengthened and your trust in the Lord strengthened.
Yes.
And with that trust and with that close walk comes so much peace and joy.
Yeah.
And that benefits you. You're such a wonderful mom. And that carries into how you parent, you know, finding that peace, finding that joy affects your day to day of how you raise your children. It's such a blessing.
It is. It's such a blessing. Reminds me of you just saying that. Reminded me of a while right after, no, before Lee and I ever got married. I had my uncle come to me, and he was like, "I know that you feel a calling on your life," and I was like, "Yes, I do. I do feel a calling on my life." At the time we were in youth, and I feel a calling to be a worship leader, and I still feel that calling that the Lord's going to use me some way in music. And I was leading our youth band at the time, and so he was like, "I know that you feel calling on your life, but I just want to speak this over you." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "The calling that the Lord ultimately has for you, you don't know about it yet." And I was like, "Okay." I was like 17. I was like, "I don't, I'm very young in the Lord,
Sure.
And I was like, I had never even had anyone speak anything over me at that time. And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "But when you discover it, it will be a aha kind of moment. Like when you realize that this is it." And it's funny because through the miscarriages and stuff, I never had that aha kind of moment. But recently I have had a close friend to me have a miscarriage, and I was telling Lee the other day, I said, I think I've found it, because I was talking to her about the Lord and that He's still good, and that I know that it's so hard to hear trust His timing. I know that it's hard to hear it.
Yes.
And I was just telling her things that I did, and ways that I coped with the grief and all that stuff. And I was like, and Lee, I was just sitting there talking to her, and I thought, if all those miscarriages summed up to get to be here for her, it was enough. Like, if that was the whole reason that I had to go through that was just for her, that's enough for me. Like, just to get to be here for my sweet friend, my sweet friends, her and her spouse, like, it's enough. And I'm so thankful that the Lord chose me to get to share my story and be able to be there, and to stand in the gap for people, to stand in and pray for them, and really, really pray for them. Like, not just, a prayer at the dinner table, but like actually pray for them. And I was just like, that reminded me of him telling me that a while back, and maybe it's still not it. Maybe there's still more, but, which would be awesome. But yeah, I think that the Lord has just been so good to me and my family, and I want everyone to know what He's done for us, and what He continues to do for us as well, and what He can do for them. Because the Bible says that He's no respecter of persons. That what He did for one, He'll do for another. And I mean, I just have countless times after time after time in my family, and even like just the other day, and someone had to answer prayer for a really close family member, and I was just like, I was reminded, Lord, you're so good. You're so good that even when it doesn't seem like you're good, and even though when it's not our timing, and
That's the hard part.
it's always hard when it's not the timing that we want. And this person was very much so struggling with timing, and I was like, but you're so good. Like, here you are. You show up every time.
Yep.
You don't leave us. You're always there. And yeah, so thankful. And you said the joy of the Lord. I just think that I've had such great examples. My whole family is very joyful.
They are. Yes,
They're
they
very
are.
joyful. I've had very good examples of being joyful.
Yeah.
But thank you. That was very sweet of you.
Yes, but I think, like you said, just realizing, if you're out there and you're struggling with something hard and you're really battling with why God would let you walk through a hard time, that can be really hard to understand sometimes. But just like you said, the way that you're able to be there for others and the way that ultimately you're sharing God's love with others through your support and through your friendships, which is what we're all called to do. It's just so meaningful because you're not coming from a position of, here I am with my 2 perfect babies and 1 on the way, and I've never had a hard time, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be okay,
Right,
and it'll
yeah.
happen in the right time. Like, because you've walked through that hard time, you're so much more relatable, and you have so much more insight and wisdom into what someone else needs to hear. And so that's such a blessing in itself. And I'm so grateful that you came on today and shared your story with me and everyone else. And I hope that it's been uplifting and it's been helpful to those who hear it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks.